My gym recently got a sled. Should I start incorporating it into my routine? If so, why?
That's a really broad question, but about the sled, but new piece of equipment, gym's bringing it in, made an investment. Clearly they see some value in it for whatever reasons. I think there's a ton of value in sleds when applied appropriately.
Yeah.
They're very versatile, very utilitarian in so many different ways. Ours are, getting pushed and pulled and driven up and down down our turf all day long, every day. I think there's a ton of good stuff. Should you use it? It depends, but I think most people could benefit by a sled in a lot of different ways. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, we definitely use the sled a lot. I think there's a lot of application, just like we said, it depends, so it can be used as more for power exercises. It can be used for things like that. It can be used for general preparedness, movement, things like that, conditioning. I like to use it a lot for clients on maybe more where I want to get more leg work in, but maybe they're a little bit sore and it's a little bit more of a recovery piece. The big thing with the sled that you'll notice is it's an only concentric driven movement, right? So when we think of like a normal, like a lunge, or even if you're doing a push, it's kind of similar movement patterns in some ways. There's this eccentric loading where we go down and then we come back up and the muscle contracts. And when we do those things, that tends to make us more sore. Eccentric loading is really, really important for building muscle. But when you incorporate a sled, however you're using it, it's really only that concentric mechanism, that portion of the muscle contraction. So it doesn't really build too much on that soreness, but it allows you to get some more work in, some more strength work, some more. You can use it for more mobility focused things, depending on different angles you're trying to get with your hips, things like that. But the first way that I start to incorporate it, right, usually with a client, and I would recommend doing it, is on maybe more of like your, let's say your like third day. We kind of talked when you break into different days of where it's just general movement, just general patterning, just to get more work done without having a lot of extra intention.
So it's less emphasis, say, on the squat or the hinge day is what you're saying. Like exactly. If you had a 3-day-a-week program and your lower body emphasis on day one, Monday was knee dominant, like a squat. And then on Wednesday, it was hip dominant. It was like a deadlift. You'd put it in like on Friday where we're incorporating, everything, but it's not so focused, or there's not an emphasis on one particular movement. This is a larger movement that kind of you're working through. The word you used was movement versus when, a lot of people, I think, look at the deadlift as an exercise or the squat as an exercise. We're talking about movements and how those movements are incorporated. I think it's a really good point. I think that I don't care where you're coming into your fitness journey, sleds can be incorporated. Yeah. I think there's some cautionary tales we probably need to talk about just with regard to how to get the most out of it. I mean, this person's going, it's over there, it's sitting there. Yeah. Like, should I use it? If I'm going to use it, how would I use it? Well, I would pick something that's, for a beginner, I would pick something that feels very natural, which is just pushing it, right? Because you can push them, you can pull them, you can
dragging them,
you can drag them, you can do a lot of different things. But the pushing is probably going to feel the most comfortable, and you're going to have the most control. Yeah. You're probably going to feel the most confident on it. So a lot of them have the vertical bars that you can push from. Sometimes those are interchangeable from one side to the other. So depending on the sled that you're looking at, maybe there are some upright bars or handles for you to go ahead and grab onto and push. Maybe there's a matching set on the other side, or maybe those bars actually come out of there and then move to the other side if you're pushing it or pulling it the other way. Sometimes they'll have a low push, so a horizontal bar that goes across it. And I've seen a few different things. They've come out with some different types of sleds slash carriages that you can push and things like that. But I'm talking about your more traditional sled. Yeah. So just getting behind it and getting yourself into a push position as if you were having to push your car through an intersection, right? Is a good way to sort of kind of feel it out. And obviously you can let go. It's very self-limiting. Yeah. You can let go, stand up, change your body position, and kind of feel what works. That's a great place to start. And you don't have to do it with a lot of load. What I would do is is get something on there that provides some type of resistance, because what you're overcoming is the friction on the surface that you're pushing it on. And once that gets going, right, as long as you keep it going, what you're trying to do is just kind of try to find a rhythm, nice marching rhythm, where you're going through a full range of motion, like through what it would look like for a run or a hike up a hill or something. So your body's probably angled forward and you're driving into the floor, the carpet, or the ground behind you. And you're just taking nice, big, full steps. I think it's a great place to start. Yeah. before you get into like running, anything with speed, any tempo work or anything like that, maybe start to load that thing up so that you're feeling a little bit of resistance there. That's it. That's all you got to do. That's a great place to start. And again, build some confidence behind it and understand, and then kind of feel what your body feels like post. Because you're under a constant amount of tension while you're pushing that sled, what are you going to feel? You're going to feel your heart rate get up, right? You're going to feel your muscles burning. You're going to feel that local muscle fatigue. Pay attention to where that's coming from. Is it my quads? Is it my calves? Is it my hamstrings? Is it my butt? Is it my back? Right? Is it my arms and shoulders, from having to stabilize up top? Is it my trunk that I'm feeling really weak in? Am I controlling my breathing? These are all things to maybe look at to kind of get you off to the right start. Things to be careful of. And this is a very common, and I don't like to make things about injuries and, exercise being dangerous. But I have seen a lot of people pop their Achilles and or tear calves.
We had somebody just do that just the other day.
In here?
Oh,
yeah? Yeah. So
I don't think just a calf, not an Achilles.
Yeah. Thankfully, just a calf and partial, not like a severe.
These things happen, right? Yeah. These things happen. And there's all different reasons why they happen, but one of the most obvious reasons is you're probably trying to push too much. You're asking too much of your body. When you get behind a sled and you load it up with a bunch of weight, and then you start driving through there, think about what you're asking your body to do in terms of producing force and power through joint angles that it is not maybe used to pushing through.
That, and you have the friction.
And you have the friction. So there's a ton of forces coming. You got gravitational force. You just got the load that you're trying to overcome, plus friction. All that stuff. So that's something to be aware of.
Yeah, especially if your body's not used to doing those types of movements.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and depending on your joint, again, not getting too much in the weeds of it, depending on your trunk angle, I think the mistake I see some people is they have no really calf strength or Achilles, like let's say fibrosity, or I don't know if that's the right, but they're just letting your heel drop every time you're taking a step. So if you're really in a big forward lean, I actually generally like to have someone more on the ball of their foot, because I think that gets a little bit more calf engagement. I see a lot of those calf injuries when if you're driving forward, if your heel just continues to
so
drop.
like the muscle tendon junction.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. There's no strength there. So if you are going to do more of a flat foot for the sled push, just make sure you're a little bit more upright and a little bit closer to it. It's more like a powered march kind of thing. But if you are going to start to lean into it, I recommend, I see a lot more success when you get onto the balls of your feet.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. So if you're looking, if you're in the human performance space, particularly like if you're into like the tactical athlete type stuff, law enforcement, military, there's a guy that I really love that covers a lot of sled work and a lot of the nuance that we're kind of talking about and how to incorporate it in terms of like bulletproofing your ankles, bulletproofing your calves and your Achilles. The guy's name is Jeff Nichols. You can find him on Instagram and YouTube at Performance First. He does an excellent job at going through some of the detail of how to not wind up in that situation. Yeah. And it's actually very practical. And it's not about how much weight you put on there. It's about how you're approaching.
Mechanics.
Yeah, your mechanics there. So he's excellent. I would go there and he's posting stuff every day, all day long. But find some of that sled work that he goes through. I think it's a really good place to start. But I think at the end of the day, it's a tool, and it can, if used properly, it can be tremendously effective for building strength, building speed and power, and building capacity. Yep. Anybody can benefit by it. You just need to understand where you're at, in time, and how to maybe put it in there appropriately. But I would not be afraid to go over there and play around on it a little bit. Yeah, we have actually a couple of questions here on shift work. So I'm just going to kind of wrap it all together and try to answer several questions at one time. And that is, these are folks that work shift jobs that have shifts. So we have a lot of folks that listen to this show that are first responders, and they sometimes have wild hours depending on what shifts they're working. Also nurses. We have a lot of nurses that listen to this show and or work out at the gym here, and we interact with. And oftentimes, just like the first responders, their shifts are all over the place. When people get sick, when people are not having a good day, like that happens at all hours. And so we need people to cover these things, and that can kind of mess up their workout, nutrition, lifestyle stuff. So the question I'll sort of pose generally is like,
can you guys talk about shift work, meal timing, sleep, exercise, and more?
So maybe we just kind of throw that to the group and kind of start, where do you want to start with that in terms of the shift worker dilemma?
Man, I think the first thing I see the issue probably most commonly is sleep. Just having no regular sleep schedule. I have someone I work with who they randomly, they don't work for a week and a half, but then they do 3 days in a row where they're working the entire night. So trying to plan and work around sleep, I think that's something that's really, really challenging. I mean, I think the first thing that I can think about is when you are not doing your shifts, still trying to stick to a general regimen as much as you can. I think that's the first thing I think of.
When you say general regimen, you mean as far as schedule that would matches what their shift work is?
Well, man, I mean, that's a hard part for
that is the hard part.
That's the hard part because this person is a mom, this person's a parent, this person has other commitments. So they do these shifts where they work the entire night, but outside of that, they can't be sleeping the entire night. They need to be doing, because especially for them, it's far and few between. So with them, I generally recommend to still get to a normal sleep schedule as far as sleeping through the night, because it is spread out for them. It's not like they're doing it every single day. And then, as far as working around the schedules, like just prepping, sleeping before, sleeping after, she is lucky because she's a surgeon, so she's able to sneak in some sleeping during her shift. It just depends if she's on call or not. So that's generally what I recommend. Maintain as much of the schedule outside of it as you can. If you are someone like we're speaking to where it is spread out, you're not doing it, 5 days a week, every single week. That's a little bit of a different case.
Yeah, I think the inconsistency of the schedule, yes, the actual hours are a challenge, but what I run into with my, couple first responder clients or folks that I've spoken to in the past is the inconsistency of the shift work, where they have like 3 normal days a week and 4 graveyard shifts a week. And that's where, frankly, it does become very challenging. I remember having a conversation with the police officer, and I had to tell him, like, if this is going to be your schedule, unfortunately, if this is your schedule 5 days a week, unfortunately, it's probably going to be better for you to try to maintain that nocturnal schedule on those 2 days that you're off. And he's like, I have a wife, I have at least one child, like that's when I spend time with them because they're awake during the day like everybody else. Like, how am I gonna reconcile that? That, frankly, is a very hard question to answer. So that unfortunately, that's part of the problem in general is if the schedule is inconsistent. If it is a little more consistent, trying to maintain that schedule as best as possible, that may just be how you have to do it. When it comes to the meal timing side of things, again, if you're 5 days a week with that same schedule, if you can try to maintain, during your waking hours, say your calorie goal is 2,000, just try to maintain that during your waking hours, whatever they tend to be. There's going to be some differences in terms of how you do that because, at 3 a.m, your options may be different as far as what you're going to be eating or what is available to you. But that would be my suggestion, is to, treat it as if it is a normal day, and that you can try to get in, during your waking hours, your protein, your calories, your macros, whatever. I think meal preps are something that I've been discussing quite a bit with one of my clients who's a EMS, and yeah, there's been a few things that we've discussed, but we had a whole episode on meal preps. We've discussed the meal kits versus the ready-made meal preps that you just throw in the microwave. A brand that he was exploring is called Huel, Huel. It's almost like freeze-dried type of food. It's almost like just add boiling water, like a cup of noodles or something like that, but it's a little more significant. So there are going to be some different strategies somebody with that type of schedule would utilize.
Yeah, it's so hard. I mean, you brought up the sleep thing, and it inevitably, like when we talk to folks that are doing this type of shift work, it starts with like an exercise or nutrition question, and it always finishes with sleep. Mm-hmm. So you just started it with sleep, because ultimately that is generally the roadblock here. And you are right, Stephen. I mean, it is so hard for me sometimes to talk to folks and just recognize, like, that is not a problem I can solve for. Yeah. And it's likely not one you can solve for. So all we're doing is trying to kind of do the best we can around what the cards that have been dealt here. And you're right. The worst one is the person that's supposed to be on let's say a 48 to 72 hour shift, or let's say they are on 72-hour shifts, and then they're trying to have a normal life the other 3 days or the 3 to 4 days of the week, right? And trying to do it differently, because invariably they're a zombie for a day and a half after they get off that shift if it's been a busy shift. And God forbid they get held over, which is a whole other thing. And I think it's a much larger conversation that I've actually had on the other side of the house on this show with a guy by the name of James Gearing from the Behind the Shield podcast, who's a huge advocate. He's a former firefighter, first responder who just does the podcast full time now. But he's a huge advocate for changing firefighter shifts for the sake of their health and their productivity. And, quite frankly, at the end of the day, for financial gain for the department because of the things that they run into over time, which is, unfortunately, they have firefighters that cannot perform their duties because they get sick or they're ill or they're injured or psychiatric crisis or, marital problems that keep them out of the job, those kind of things. Again, larger conversation for a different podcast at a different time, but that is not something we can fix. Yeah. What I heard you start to do there, Stephen, though, is like, what are some things you can do to work around this specific to, okay, I may get held over. Am I prepared for this? Do I have meals that I can get in, right? We haven't got to the fitness part yet, but do I have meals readily available for me, whether they're frozen and in the freezer at the firehouse, that I can quickly pull out, reheat, do something with. Is there a solution for me at home once I get home? Like I just got held over for a shift and I didn't get to the grocery store, so I don't have those foods available to me or whatever else. Well, think about that. How can we pre-plan better? Is it about making a trip to the grocery store ahead of time and making sure you have that stuff? Is it about pre-packing some stuff, having a couple of emergency meals, packed away for you to do that? That could be very helpful in maintaining your energy level and then moving into the next piece, which is then trying to do some kind of exercise and keep your exercise routine regular. Because the first thing that happens when I get tired and hungry, I lose my drive to exercise. Like, I don't know about you guys, but it's the hardest thing to overcome, especially when I know it, because then I get really frustrated and anxious and pissed off about it. Like, I know I didn't eat for whatever reason. I'm tired, I'm hungry, and I have to work out, and I don't want to do that. And just the not wanting to do it pisses me off.
There's nothing worse than being hungry and having to work out.
Yeah.
It happened to me today.
Yeah. So you're trying to cram this in. The other thing I think with doing this is a podcast we just did. Ryan and I just did together. We actually just dropped it this morning. So today is July 8th. It's on making the most out of, your schedule when you're short on time to get stuff done and how to prioritize your workouts there. So this, I think, is critical for people that are on this shift work that are in between, or maybe, having to make decisions about, taking that extra shift, or, maybe it's a choice and maybe it isn't, but also just trying to balance all the things, family, kids, sleep.
I was going to say, do I work out or do I go home and sleep?
Yeah. How do I, like, if I'm caught in a patch where I'm having a little bit of a tough time balancing all this, how do I, knowing that my time is short or my energy is limited or whatever else, how do I make the most out of my workouts? So on a short time schedule, we literally just dropped that one today because of these similar questions we've been getting.
Yeah.
How to prioritize which sets, which exercise, which routines for the week, how to moderate that and manage that, to make it effective for us. I think that's another thing to be aware of. And I think a lot of times when people ask these questions, what they're having a tough time doing is prioritizing the important things, in order of how do we knock this off, right? Like going back to this podcast is like, what are my A, B, and C priorities here?
Yeah.
And so if I had to weigh in on those, the first thing I'm going to say is if I start from the top, it's going to be sleep every time.
Yeah.
Sleep over my exercise. However, I understand that becomes problematic over time. But if I have a choice and I can catch up on something, it's going to be my sleep. That's going to come number one for me. Number two then would be my nutrition, making sure that I'm hydrated and I'm fueled to fuel my brain, fuel my body for the job that I need to do and the human that I need to be throughout the day. And then lastly, it's going to be the exercise. And this is coming from a dude that owns a gym that has, personal training business and whatever else. Yes, I'm going to prioritize your sleep and your nutrition over your exercise every single time, because if those things aren't being prioritized, your exercise is on a clock.
Yep. Yeah. I was going to say, if you're in the hole with your sleep and you're in the hole with your nutrition, you're just going to dig yourself a deeper and deeper hole if you don't get those prioritized.
And if you are prioritizing your sleep and your nutrition, you will find that you have more motivation to work out when you do have the time. I was just having this conversation with that client of mine, that sleep hasn't been great. Nutrition hasn't been hasn't been great either. How do I get more motivation to work out, sleep, and eat?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. I think the last tip, if we're specifically for exercise, I think I've seen the most success So one, as far as timing, if you are trying to work out, depending how many days a week you're doing your shift work, I do see the most success doing your workout immediately, or not immediately, but prior to your shift. Because I think after having that long shift and then trying to get the motivation to go to the gym, it's either going to be garbage, you're going to be tired. But with that, really monitoring that you're doing enough to really exercise can energize you for that shift without over fatiguing you. So playing that game of not overreaching on those days. And if you are aware that, let's say you do your 3 or 4 day long shifts and then you have these other days, doing your more intense, longer exercise days outside on those days where you are not working. And then those shorter, the more maintenance, more what's the priority. There's more amended things that we were talking about, like with the 30-minute reducing your program. And then if this is your regular schedule, planning around that, maybe you just hit one or maybe even just one lift or one workout during those 3 days that you work, just to keep you things rolling, even just for your mental, physical health, well-being, to keep you motivated, and then doing your more intense days on the off days and planning for that in your program. So
solid advice.
Next question. Fitness and physique is important to me. I have a girlfriend of 3 years and we're in a committed relationship, possibly thinking about marriage, but she started to put on weight. I think she's probably gained 15 to 20 pounds over the last 2 years. Every time I suggest us going to the gym together like we regularly used to, or getting outside to hike or ride bikes, she'd rather meet up with me later and stay in our do lunch with her friends. I'm worried about her health and, yes, her physique. Any suggestions on how to get her motivated to hit the gym or get outside?
I am not a relationship counselor, and I don't think anybody else is here too, but I think that question is a very common concern for a lot of people, males and females alike. And we've had it here on the show before. I remember very specifically, because it got some attention on Instagram. There was a question it was coming from a female about her husband, and it was very, very similar. She was concerned for his health, but also about his physique. And I think she put in there, she's like, I'm worried. He's still an attractive man to me for all the things, but the physical piece is starting to become an issue. I only bring that up as to say this isn't the first time we've answered this on the show, and it was coming from, male to female, not female to male, or female to male, not male to female. So here we go. How do you guys want to start? Who wants to start with the do these jeans make my butt look big?
Oh man. I've been married for a while. I think I'm coming up on 5 years in September.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm by no means a relationship guru, but I have learned some things in my marriage, and I'm still married, and I made it through the lockdowns, freshly married. So I think I have some knowledge.
That's a solid qualifier, dude. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing is, especially if they're not currently in an exercise routine at all, is it can't feel like a force, like you're pushing them towards it. And really initially, it is good to be on a set program and doing strength training and be doing these things that we know are the most optimal. But initially, just finding things, whether it's activities you can do together or they can do on their own, that they enjoy. Because the first step for anyone who's wanting to start exercising in general is just getting movement. It's just moving again. So whether it's the very, very simple things like, hey, let's go for a walk together. Hey, you want to go on this hike? Hey, let's play whatever the sport, those things, then that builds into the feelings of wanting to move again and enjoying that. And then that kind of starts to build the motivation and the energy to sleep better, to eat better. And then as those things fall into place, then you can start to find the situations that your partner enjoys getting into more of a serious exercise program, whether it's strengthening or anything with that. And then even from there, know that it may not be the same exact version that you enjoy. So I know for me and my wife, we were struggling for a while, me training her, which if anyone who is a trainer tries to train their partner has learned that doesn't always go super easily.
I learned that a million years ago.
Wanting to learn from your partner, sometimes it's like, even if you are a fitness professional.
What would you know?
They don't see
what would I fucking know? I don't know.
Yeah.
People just pay me to do this. Anyways, so, but really for my wife, her working out on her own, she was an athlete, being on a team, things like that was really something that was motivating for her. So her just going to the gym alone was just not really going to happen. But where she's actually really started to flourish more and more is enjoying our group classes and getting in that team environment and getting in that push from other people. So it might just be finding the environment that your partner enjoys and can actually feel motivated to do things. And it may not look exactly like what you want it to look like for yourself.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's really solid take, solid advice.
Yeah, I agree there. And I would just to maybe look at it from a little bit of a different perspective. It's sort of in the way the question was phrased, it sounds like, this girlfriend maybe used to participate in more physical activity with her partner. So I think maybe the first thing that I would ask is what's changed. What is different now versus versus then. So that question could lead you in a lot of different directions. And I would like to think that especially a female has noticed that she's gained 15 to 20 pounds. Yeah. And I'm almost guaranteed they've noticed.
Yeah. Guaranteed, man.
So to see that and to know that and to still be kind of struggling to get started, that to me suggests some level of ambivalence. Like this individual knows like, okay, yeah, I should be exercising more. I used to look like this and this is what I was doing then. Why am I not doing that now when the answer seems so obvious? So this is, as a counselor, this is a type of question that I ask to help people. It's two questions actually to work through ambivalence. So in this situation, let's say it is, this individual who's having a hard time starting to exercise again. Number one, what is the best thing about continuing to not exercise? What's the best part? What are you enjoying about not exercising? What are you getting out of it? That's the first question.
Love it.
Second question is, what is the worst thing that could happen if you start exercising again? What's the worst part about exercising? So that might seem kind of counterintuitive. Like I'm almost asking them to stick.
I'm taking some notes over here.
Yeah, but at the same time, like if you were just to come out as a partner and ask those questions of your partner, that can be met with resistance. So I think the approach is more coming from a caring and position as far as I'm worried about your health. I really enjoyed doing these things with you. I'm seeing that you're not wanting to do that anymore. Trying to be more sensitive, I think.
Oh, I love this. Here we go. I knew the debate was coming at some point.
The framing of those questions is very important.
Those questions up.
I'm thinking in terms more of strategy of like, okay, what is actually going on here? Not that I would just come in the door and let me ask you two crazy questions. I wouldn't lead.
Why don't you like working out?
And it's also very important that if you are asking those questions specifically, when I do ask those questions specifically, that I am coming from as impartial and a agendaless position as possible. So that's and that can be easier said than done. But asking that in a completely neutral way, it helps people work through like what is it? What is it about not working out that I do enjoy? Like how have I gotten into this habit versus the habits I was in before? And it just is it's a question meant to help evoke an understanding of like, wait, what am I afraid of? What's the worst thing that could happen? What am I avoiding? And what am I getting out of staying where I am now?
Yeah, I think first off, I think you're making some excellent points there. And I think that is a very cerebral way of thinking about how to go about the questions, because I think that's where people are challenged in the relationships. Like, I don't want to step into this steaming pile of shit because I know exactly what's going to happen when I do. Yeah. And so there's a few things that I would take away. And then obviously given Cece's response to that, to kind of how you were coming at it, like this is going to be my take at this, because this is what I found that works well sort of in this relationship. And that is, first off, if we're going to have conversations about things like this, I think one of the things that we built our relationship on is just coming to the conversation with having had some thought about this, like and really looking at it from maybe a neutral or I would even say like in a very objective perspective, like, okay, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings here. What am I feeling about this, right? So, and one of those things is you could be asking yourself the same questions, like, what is it that I like most about, my partner not working out? And what is it that I hate about it, right? About not working out. And then be very honest with those answers that you come up with you come up with in your own head. But I think the point I'm getting at here is and you mentioned it, Cece, and that is coming at the conversation with a certain level of care. And I think in doing that, you would maybe set it up a little bit differently. And that is making sure the timing of this conversation is really well thought out. Like, and maybe it's even in an environment where it's not going to be interrupted by screaming kid, barking dog, like whatever, work phone calls, whatever else. Like, maybe we I don't think this doesn't need to be freaking, picnic on the beach type of conversation. That's what I'm saying. But just put some care into when, the timing of the conversation and the environment that you have it in. And then secondly, if you're approaching it with your concern primarily is for your partner's health, right, and their well-being, I think that actually sets the stage in a way that may make this, and then fucking say that, say that like, hey, look, I want to have this conversation with you because I'm concerned. And I'm concerned for these very specific reasons. And I understand, handle the elephant in the room. I understand that this could come off very differently or maybe perceived very differently. And I want to assure you that that's not the case. No, that might not work. I'm just saying you might want to put it out there just to put it out there. And then again, handle it like maybe Steven says, look, these are my concerns and these are the reasons why. Like you've mentioned these things to me. I've paid attention to the things that you've said, your behaviors, and these things concern me. And I don't want you to feel like that. And I want to be helpful. I also don't want to make you feel forced into doing anything you don't want to do, but then go down that path of, hey, I want you to be healthier. I really like hanging out with you. I'd like to do that with you together. If that's not something you want to do, that's cool. Just tell me. But I still want to address this thing, which is, your health and your well-being. Now, here's the other thing I would say. Anybody that's chasing health, and I mean chasing it, like with a passion for getting better at this, when they do that, they generally end up seeing some aesthetic and beyond results, right? And so if they're really focused on getting healthier, they may still feel insecure about the 15 to 20 pounds that he or she has put on or whatever else. But I honestly believe, and because I've seen it happen a million times, is when you chase health, the other things come along with it. The aesthetic ends up coming along with it. The weight loss will happen, right? Yeah. And, and how that happens and how fast it happens, that's not for me to say. We couldn't get into that, but it happens. And, a person will generally feel more confident about it. And it's not, I told you so at the end. It's like, this is awesome. Celebrate it, make a comment. It doesn't have to be, hey, I noticed you lost 5 pounds. That's awesome. You look so much better. Don't be an asshole, right? But think about, again, if you approach that conversation the same way, like, hey, looking good, babe, that outfit looks great on you today, kind of thing. Shit, that kind of mileage will get you way further down the road. And it opens the door to the next conversation. So again, I'm not a relationship counselor here. I've been around the block a few times and stepped into that steaming pile of shit more than one time. So, maybe that's it. But I think, again, approaching it with a level of care, but also if this is your partner and this is somebody you really care about and you're having a relationship, you have a fucking responsibility to have that conversation with them if it concerns you. And if you can't have that conversation, I would look inwardly there first. And then secondly, like maybe you need to get a third party involved, in this. And that's perfectly fine. That is an okay answer. And I'm totally fine with that answer. Like maybe you need to get a third party involved to get involved and help moderate and mediate that conversation, the conversations. Because I bet if you can't have that conversation, there's a lot of other conversations you're not able to have either, and you're not having, which is probably put you in the position that you're in right now. So that's my fucking Dr. Phil, advice for the day.
I notice my shoulders hurt every time I bench with a barbell, but they don't when I use dumbbells, even with similar load. Why is that?
I find that, the biggest thing initially is people don't necessarily think about this, but we have a lot of asymmetry. And depending if you played some sort of sport or something like that, that exacerbated that asymmetry in your shoulders and your trunk and your rib cage, things like that. Where when you're at a bar that's fixed, for most people, that forces you into a position that might not feel good if you're trying to be symmetric, but your structure is asymmetric. So generally, when you're pressing with dumbbells, because they are more of an open chain, they allow for more movement fluidly around the shoulder. So even if there's a little bit of asymmetry, it may actually align your structures in a way that feels better. So generally more of a fluid, it's more of a natural pressing mechanism. You can even get some more rotation, things like that. So there's more freedom in it generally for a lot of people. So I think that's the biggest thing I initially see.
I would agree.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to keep in mind here. Like if you have a pre-existing condition outside of an asymmetry, think about this. If you're fixing your hand, and this you just sort of explained this, but if you're fixing your hand to a bar, the bar is dictating that path at some level, or the path that the bar goes through is being dictated by the position that you are automatically fixed in because your hands are attached to this bar. And there are a lot of workarounds to this. You can narrow your grip. You can widen your grip to change the position of your shoulder.
Reduce range of motion, things like that.
Yeah, you can change range of motion. You can do assisted stuff. There's several reasons why your shoulders could be bothering you. And generally what we see, I think in the big scheme of things, it's generally, poor, or I don't want to say poor, but let's just say some type of limitation within your joint mechanics, and oftentimes this comes from an overuse pattern, right? And so oftentimes when we're talking about the gym, it comes from doing a lot of barbell bench pressing, whether you're doing on an incline, whether you're doing it on a flat bench. I would ask, does it feel the same when you do an incline barbell bench press versus a flat barbell bench press? My bet would be, without knowing anything, that you probably feel better doing an incline than you do a flat bench. And the reason being is because you have changed the position of the shoulder, which doesn't put as much maybe pressure in that joint capsule, doesn't put some of those fibers on the same amount of stretch. Maybe there's a lot of things that could be going on there. Why is the bench press important? I don't know. Only you can answer that. It's just a movement. Why does the dumbbells feel better? You just answered it, I think. And I think what's important for people to take away from maybe this thing is there could be a lot of reasons why it hurts versus why it doesn't hurt with the dumbbells. But if you just take at the very, very high level, scratch the surface about what you said, and you think about the things that you're doing when you're in the gym with all things, whether it be barbell, dumbbells, kettlebells, cables, whatever else, you just mentioned something very important, is that I think people need to get more variety in their workouts, and they should probably be gravitating through the things that don't hurt them, right? And then if something is hurting them, ask the deeper question as to why. Because I can't tell you exactly why. What I can tell you is you shouldn't feel pain when you're doing that. And there's many, many reasons why you may be feeling that. So just moving over to the dumbbell bench press and pushing the same weight to avoid the pain that you feel on the barbell bench press doesn't necessarily make that a great alternative, right? It just means you found a workaround.
Yeah.
But there's some underlying thing there that you probably want to have a look at. And I think that's the thing that gets ignored here. Oh, well, I can do this over here and it doesn't hurt, so I'm going to do that now. Yeah, but why does that hurt? It shouldn't do that. So just that's the takeaway that I would leave people with on. All right, this question is about weight loss plateaus.
How do I break this weight loss plateau that I've been in for the last 6 weeks?
The first thing I would ask you is, what have you been doing for the last 6 weeks? And then I would expand that question to, what have you been doing over the last 6 months? So you have most likely arrived at this plateau for a reason. More often than not, when we see weight loss plateaus, a plateau suggests that you were losing weight at some point in time. So you were having success, and now your success has been stymied. That's your 10-cent word of the day, stymied.
I love it.
You are now stagnant. So the typical scenario here is somebody started a crash diet. Somebody went into a very deep caloric deficit, and that caloric deficit worked at first. If you are starving, you will lose weight initially. However, your body's not going to go down that easy. We are adaptation machines. We are survival machines. And your body doesn't know the difference between you significantly restricting calories and food just not being available, because 5,000 years ago, there could be scenarios where there simply was not food available and you needed to survive on 1,000 calories a day just to get to the next kill or gathering or whatever, where you'll eat again. So that hasn't changed for us as far as our human biology. How is that manifesting in your weight loss plateau? You were essentially starving yourself. You were losing weight at first until your body was like, all right, I guess there's not that much. I guess we got a famine going on here. So we got to pump the brakes on some of our caloric expenditure in order to conserve the minimal amount of calories that we are consuming. And that sort of pump the brakes, reduce caloric expenditure state is not conducive to weight loss. If you're trying to lose body fat specifically, all body fat is stored energy that your body will try to utilize when there is not enough energy available. But it's not going to release that, or it's not going to readily burn that if you're in this sort of energy conservation state, because your body, again, is trying to keep you alive for as long as possible. Your body's your friend. It's doing you a favor. However, that's not going to be a weight loss, conditions that are conducive to weight loss. So
yeah, what's the answer?
Answer the
how
question,
do I fix this shit?
Yeah, so there's your context. So how do I fix this? You're going to have to eat more. And you're probably going to actually gain weight initially before you go back onto losing weight.
What?
I know.
Math.
Wow, Stephen, I think you're talking about periodization a little bit.
What a ripoff. Yes, you're going to have.
Yeah,
so what most people do is caloric deficit, ride it till I die kind
Armageddon.
of thing. Yeah, let's just stay in this caloric deficit. It worked at first. It should keep working, right? If some is good, more is better.
If I eat one almond every day, I'll lose weight.
Yeah, okay. I have to just exercise more, eat less, exercise more, eat less. And then you create this debt where you're actually getting deeper and deeper into the hole. So in order to break that plateau, you're going to have to, unfortunately, make some changes. You're going to have to eat properly. You're going to have to actually nourish yourself to a proper level. First, you have to understand what that proper level is, and then you have to understand where you have been relative to that proper level and how much of a gap you have to bridge. And then, unfortunately, you're going to have to go through somewhat of a rehabilitative process, or a reverse diet is, the typical technique, I guess you would say, to again, replenish yourself, get back to homeostasis, get back to balance. And now we can lever up and down more effectively.
And this is the part where people quit before they've even gotten started.
Yep.
Right? Because what you've just said sounds like a lot of work. And the reality of it is it's more work than it took them to get to this point in the first place. They're not ready for that answer. They're generally not ready for that answer. And so the first thing about getting through a weight loss plateau is getting past yourself. When you get this information from a coach, when the reality hits you square in the face,
that you screwed yourself.
Yeah, that you dug yourself a really big hole here. And that is a tough one to swallow, man. That means but I lost weight. Yeah, you did. You did that right.
How's that going now?
Yeah, but you didn't manage that properly. So in a way, you actually you consider that you did it wrong. So, if we're looking like right and wrong, I think that's the thing in terms of breaking through a plateau. I mean, you just explained it very simply, but the hardest part is getting past now what the fuck do I do? And you're telling me that I have way more work to do than I ever imagined. I just thought the answer was eat less, run more, eat less, more Orange Theory, eat less, stop drinking wine. I stopped drinking wine, man. Like I gave up. That was really important to me.
I'm barely eating any bread.
Yeah, I'm not even eating the bread. Yeah. Or it's like, I'm not eating any bread anymore. And it's definitely not the full bottle of wine I'm drinking every night that's contributing to this. But those are the kind of realities that I think people drop into that they end up quitting before they started. So the weight loss plateau it's always a depends question. Where have you been? Where are you now? Where are we trying to get to? What is the gap? Think about, like, just kind of in simple terms, you've likely put yourself in a position where you're in some debt. You have to repay that debt. Sometimes you got to do overtime or work overtime. We've used that analogy before in terms of finance in order to put some more money, and in this case, some more currency in the bank in order to be able to work with. Sometimes it means working out less. At the same time, depending on, the type of down regulations we've had, or, how quickly we're trying to come out of this hole. But I think the more important thing is, like, having a plan to do this, not just thinking like there's one answer. There's a supplement, there's a meal, there's a workout, there's a caloric number, and that's it.
Fix my cortisol.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just doing math. There's work that has to be put in here. Stephen and I have covered this topic at length in a few different ways on this podcast a few times. Specifically, what we're talking about is metabolic adaptation. It comes up a lot. No matter how much we explain it, it's still very misunderstood. And I think people are very confused by it. And again, I think they're trying to they're trying to apply somebody else's metabolic adaptation to their situation and kind of finish the story. Well, Susie did this over here, or Johnny did this over here, and because they did this, like, that's what I need to be doing. And so if I just did a little bit of that, plus what I know has worked for me in the past, boom, there's my answer. Yet the weight loss plateau continues. And then oftentimes, at some point, that plateau isn't a plateau anymore. And what ends up happening? It ends up being weight gain time. So we're not at a weight loss plateau anymore. We end up in a weight gain when we hit a caloric deficit we cannot maintain anymore, we start eating a little more, we start moving less because we have less energy, because we're not as quote unquote motivated, because we're throwing our hands up and going off the rails, as they say. And once you hit that point, now you're even deeper and deeper and deeper than you were. So the key is try not to hit the weight loss plateau by periodization.
I think it's also expectation, and not to, this is a journey. So, I mean, to have the expectation that you're going to be where you want to be in 4 months or 3 months, that's probably not necessarily a realistic expectation, because as we just talked about, you need to go through a periodized kind of program, so that, as you mentioned earlier, I mean, and life happens, right? So there's detours and construction and whatnot. So I think it's having that conversation with somebody that's going into this journey and saying, hey, let's set the expectations.
Yeah, that this is going to be a gradual process. This is going to take time. And we've used the analogy before of, buying something with a credit card so you can have it now when you really can't afford it. Yep. So you can get maybe some satisfaction that you have your shiny thing immediately, but you're going to have to pay it back plus interest on the backside.